Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Alicia Vaz. I'm a Global Account Manager in the Architecture, Engineering and Construction team. And today I am excited to be your host for this month's instalment of our webinar, where we'll be covering the latest 3D and indoor capabilities readily available in the ArcGIS system. Now, alongside me today, I am joined by two of our very own domain experts. So first up, we have Dave.
Morning, everyone. Hi, I'm Dave Thompson. I'm a GIS consultant in our government team.
And next we have Dan.
Yes, good morning, everyone. My name's Daniel. I'm a senior GIS consultant in our transport, commercial and AAC practice and professional services.
Thank you both. I'm really excited to see what you've prepared for us today, but more importantly, learn a thing or two myself on 3D and indoors. So I will be taking notes. But before we get started with today's webinar, just a little bit of housekeeping. Today's webinar is live, so if you do need to drop off at any point, please don't worry. A copy of the recording alongside the slide deck and any resources referenced today will be circulated in a follow-up email. At the end of today's webinar, we will be taking a live Q&A. So if you do have any questions as we go, you can submit them on Slido. Now, if you haven't used Slido before, don't worry. To get started, you can either scan the QR code on the screen or navigate to slido.com and enter in the event code. Likewise, if there's any questions that resonate with you as we go throughout today's webinar, please make sure that you upvote them. And closer to the end of today's webinar, you will see a poll section within Slido. This is a really great opportunity to provide your feedback, but also your thoughts on today's webinar so we can improve for next time. So with that in mind, I'd now like to hand you over to Dave, who's going to kick things off with 3D in ArcGIS. So Dave, over to you.
Thanks, Alicia. Please, you've got that notebook ready. Hopefully my screen is coming through. If not, please let me know. Good morning, everyone. So today, Dan and I are going to be covering the basics of 3D in ArcGIS, embedding 3D web scenes into your ArcGIS apps, the indoor mapping capabilities in ArcGIS, and we will also demonstrate what ArcGIS Urban has to offer. But first, how do I access 3D in ArcGIS? 3D is accessible across ArcGIS to all user types at different levels of capability, from viewing 3D scenes to working with targeted 3D products like ArcGIS Urban and ArcGIS Reality Studio. But why would you want to work in 3D? So 3D models provide real-world context to your projects, a more intuitive and realistic representation of geographic features such as buildings, terrain, and infrastructure. And such a realistic representation can be more engaging and immersive than working with a 2D representation of the world. So this realistic representation could be a digital twin of your area of interest, which would allow you to simulate real-world operations and processes. And our customers are increasingly embedding 3D into their existing workflows and creating new processes that include the use of 3D data, examples of which you may have seen at this year's annual conference or from reading Esri case studies or blogs. So where do I access 3D capabilities in ArcGIS? So on the desktop, you've got ArcGIS Pro, which supports scenes, 3D symbology, and analysis tools. Moving away from desktop, we have Scene Viewer, an easy-to-use web application for visualizing, exploring, and editing 3D content. And the scenes that are created in Scene Viewer can then be embedded within the ArcGIS app builders, such as Instant Apps, Dashboards, Story Maps, and Experience Builder. And moving on to the more targeted 3D products, ArcGIS Urban enables planners and design professionals to collaborate across teams with a web-based 3D solution that supports scenario planning and impact assessment. Then we have ArcGIS City Engine, which is an advanced 3D modeling application for creating immersive urban environments in less time than with traditional modeling techniques. We have ArcGIS Reality Studio, which is an advanced photogrammetry product. And then we've got ArcGIS Indoors, which is an indoor mapping, wayfinding, and space management software which enables organizations to build an indoor GIS. And Indoors capabilities are not solely accessible through ArcGIS Indoors. So indoor mapping capabilities exist across ArcGIS. So indoor GIS enables shared awareness of estate operations and management to deliver greater efficiency and engagement, and it provides visibility into asset locations, patterns of use, and analytics to understand spaces and find smarter ways to interact with our built environments. But before we delve deeper into Indoors GIS and ArcGIS Urban, we will look at some of the 3D capabilities in the ArcGIS system, including 3D symbology, visualization, and creating and embedding scenes in the app builders. And Dan will get us started with Scene Viewer. So from my pod in the Edinburgh office to the pod that Dan is in, over to you, Dan.
Thanks for that, Dave. So yeah, I guess when starting with 3D and ArcGIS, the logical place to start is in the scene viewer. And much like with the map viewer, we have all the same capability we're used to. So we can add layers, we can edit data, we can change our base maps, but you'll also notice that we have access to a few different tools as well, such as daylight and weather, and some scene tools, and I'll touch on them a bit later in this demo as well. Now, when adding data to our maps, we can add data from our content or from the Living Atlas. And in my map just now, you can see I've added some population data for regions across England. So those areas in dark blue are where population is greater. How can we visualize this in 3D? So here's that same data set, but what I've done is I've extruded this data based on that total population value. So the areas that are higher, more extruded from my map, are those areas with higher population. Now, viewing choropleth data in 3D is great and all, but not particularly useful other than to add a little bit of flair to our map. So let's take a look at a slightly smaller scale example. So let's take a look now in Cambridge. So here I have a few building footprints, and you can see that these have been symbolized based on the type of building they're there, so detached, flats, semi-detached, etc. But how can we extrude these features into our map? So in our layer list on the left-hand side, you'll see that we have 2D symbology options, and these are much the same that they are in the map viewer. Again, I can symbolize by an attribute. But in the scene viewer, I also have this 3D types option. So within here, you can see that all of my polygons have been extruded by the same value, in this case 4 meters. But what I have in this data set is a field within my data called height. And this is a height value associated to each of those buildings. And by selecting this and setting that value to meters, you can see that each of my building footprints has now been extruded by the value in that height attribute. It's important to note that 3D symbology isn't just for polygons, it's for points too. So let's take a quick look up in Scotland now at some 2D points. Now these points represent locations of wind turbines within a wind farm in Scotland. But how can we then turn these into some meaningful 3D symbols? So again, selecting my layer in the map pane, I have the option to change the 2D symbol, but I also have that 3D option again. And if I select this, you'll see that a default 3D symbol has been applied to those points. But this isn't really great if we're trying to show wind turbines. So in ArcGIS Online as standard, you have access to a whole host of different marker types, everything from trees to various kind of signs and signals. But what I'm interested in is in infrastructure here. You'll see that we have a handy wind turbine symbol available to us out of the box. So if I select this, my symbols will change, but they've vanished from my map. And that's because, just like before, they've had this fixed size applied to them. Now, if I change this to attribute driven, I have a handy field within my dataset called hub height, and that's telling me the height of each of these wind turbines within my dataset. So if I select this and zoom in, you can see that my wind turbines have now been extruded from the map based on that hub height attribute at meters. So this scene's starting to look a little bit more realistic now, but let's take this to the next level. So what I've done here is I've draped some 3D imagery over the top of my scene. And what I've also done is I've thrown on a little weather effect as well. And we are in Scotland after all, so let's turn on the rain. But I do think this has been a little bit unfair to Scotland recently. There's been some lovely weather up here. So let's have a look in our weather settings here on the pane on the right hand side, and we can turn on the sun. And there, I think that's a slightly more accurate representation of what it's been like up here recently. You'll notice below the daylight and weather settings, there's this scene tools option as well. And the one I want to show you here is this elevation profile tool. So if I draw a line across my scene like so, you can see that a cross section of elevation is generated in this graph up here. And this is using the underlying ground elevation dataset loaded into our scene. So we've started to create a reasonably realistic scene here, but let's see how we can take this to the next level. So here's another scene I've created here. And you may have noticed in my last demo, I had these panels on the bottom. Now, these panels here are my slides, and these are to scene viewer, what bookmarks are to map viewer. If I select on them, my map pans and zooms to that location, and depending on what layers I have enabled or pop-ups opened, they'll be saved in my slide configuration. So we're now over London, but let's take a closer look at Westminster, which is what my next slide is. Now you notice that the base map is updated, and in here what I've done is I've turned on the 3D topographic base map. Now this base map is available to all users of ArcGIS Online and has national coverage. So wherever you're working with data, you should have some 3D extruded buildings, although maybe not quite as detailed as the House of Parliament here, or my personal favourite, the London Eye across the river. And I think you'll agree this is quite a cool little data set here, and helps you create a nice little 3D scene out of the box with some base map that's available to you in ArcGIS Online. Let's head over to Cambridge now, which is my next slide. And just like before, I'm going to turn on that 3D topographic base map. But how can we take this a step further? Now, if I turn on my next slide, you'll see that I have a really, really high detailed 3D ortho mesh, and this has been provided by our partners Blue Sky, and this has been collected by a series of drone images that have been stitched together and draped over our 3D scene. I think you'd agree it's quite impressive and incredibly detailed. We can zoom in on the trains here and see a lot of detail as well. Now, just because we've added a 3D ortho mesh to our scene doesn't mean we can't add anything else to it. So if I click on my next slide here, you can see that I've added a cycle network layer from Sustrans from the Living Atlas. And I've extruded this symbology as well, so it stands out a bit in our scene. And we can follow that cycle network across Cambridge, like so. Now, viewing everything in Scene Viewer is great, and using these widgets along the bottom is great if you're trying to deliver a presentation, much like I am now. But let's say you want to ingest your scene within an application. You'll see this button on the left-hand side called Create App. And this allows us to embed our scene in all of our applications that we know and love, so dashboards, story maps, experience builder, and instant apps. And we're even given access to some applications specifically for Scene Viewer in 360 VR Experience. But let's take a look at creating an instant app to begin with. Now, once my instant app loads, you'll see that I'm offered a couple of templates that support 3D scenes, and I can even preview these before deciding which one's right for me, just to double check that it's looking and feeling like I want it to. So that's how to create a simple app in Instant Apps. Select your template, but let's take a look at an Experience Builder app with an embedded scene. So this is an Experience Builder app I created earlier, and I've already embedded within this our highly detailed Cambridge mesh, like so. Now, like every other Experience Builder, we have access to a whole host of widgets, from the search function, our pan and zoom function, we have our layer list, and we have our base map changer. But the eagle-eyed amongst you might also have spotted that we have this widget along the bottom here, and this is our fly controller. And what this allows me to do is to interact with 3D web scenes. So if I plot a point on the map there and click play, My camera will pan and zoom around that point. And again, this is really good if you're trying to deliver presentations or convey information out a specific location on your scene. I pause that there and then go back into my layer list and turn back on our cycle network scene, like so. The other options I have within the fly controller are to fly along a certain path, and this allows me to digitize a path, in this case along my cycle network, like so. Once I'm happy with it, click play, and I'll follow that path that I've digitized. And again, really useful if you're in a presentation and trying to convey a story along a certain route, in this case the cycle network. Now, we focused quite heavily on 3D on the outside, but obviously the title of this webinar was 3D and indoors. So let's now take a look at how we can embed a 3D indoors scene into Experience Builder. Now, here we have an ArcGIS Indoors information model embedded into our 3D scene, and this is an ArcGIS Indoors information model of our head office in Aylesbury. Now, the eagle-eyed amongst you might have spotted this widget on the right-hand side, and what this widget allows us to do is interact with the various floors in our indoor information model. So as I toggle through the floor options, you can see that my model updates like so. Now, this model is often created from things like CAD or BIM files and converted in ArcGIS Pro and published to ArcGIS Online, and we can then interact with them using this widget. Other things you might have noticed within this 3D scene is this 3D toolbox up on the top right here, and this is available to all 3D scenes when embedded within ArcGIS Experience Builder. Now, this has access to those daylight and weather settings that I showed earlier in the scene, but it also gives us access to a few additional tools as well, and one of my favorites is the shadow cast tool. And what this does is if I drag this slider, it shows you which portions of our scene are covered are cast in shadow for any given hour in the day. So you can see that as I drag this slider, parts of our car park are in shadow for quite a lot of time throughout the day. Next, the shadow cast tool, we have the line of sight tool, and this does pretty much exactly what it says on the tin. So if I create some new analysis, and let's say I'm located at the top of this building here, I want to see if I'm able to view this canal down here. The line of sight tool shows me that our indoor information model, or our building in this case, is blocking my line of sight by this green into red line here. And then the final tool I want to show you in the 3D toolbox is the slice tool. And what this allows you to do is to create cross sections of your 3D models like so. And this is really good if you have complex CAD or BIM images and wanting to ingest them in ArcGIS Online. It can give you really nice cross sections, see down corridors, see pipelines and ducting as well. So we've had a look at Experience Builder and we've had a look at ArcGIS Indoors in 3D, but it's important to know that ArcGIS Indoors is also consumable in 2D and also consumable in several of our other app offerings, one of those being dashboards. So here we have a different indoors information model situated within a dashboard. And we can filter our floors by using the standard category selector in dashboards. So if I select floor 2, for example, you see my indoor information model update, and all those widgets are in the outside update as well. It's important to note that even these reports here have been captured using Survey 123, and it's just an example of how you can integrate the indoor information model with other features in ArcGIS Online. So as we filter that floor, those reports associated with that floor update as well. Final dashboard I want to show you is this dashboard. Now, it's important to note that this dashboard isn't even using an indoor information model. This is simply a series of kind of polygons that have been digitized, and as I select department, cafe, for example, my map filters and pans and zooms and shows me those polygons associated with cafes across our campus. Now, many of our customers are starting to see the benefits of indoor capabilities to help them plan and manage retail spaces, visualize developments, and explore relationships between adjoined buildings and spaces. Now, once part of our system, all of your other data sets can be integrated alongside the indoor information models, from real-time tracking to survey forms and imagery layers. And through ArcGIS Indoors Organization license type, you also get access to configurable indoor-specific applications that allow users to plan spaces, book desks, and even view indoor spaces via mobile applications. But taking a step back outside now, I'm going to hand back over to Dave, who's going to walk us through ArcGIS Urban. So back to you, Dave.
Thank you, Dan. I wish we had the power to control the sun like that in Scotland in real life. That would be fantastic. ArcGIS Urban, great tool, relatively new to customers in the UK. So what I'm going to do in the next few minutes is give you a demo of the three elements of Urban that you see on the screen, and how Urban can be used as a system of record for development within your area of interest. So a lot of our customers begin their journey in this space using Scene Viewer, but are migrating to using ArcGIS Urban in their workflows. And this is because Urban builds upon the capabilities in Scene Viewer and combines editing, analysis, and reporting in a streamlined interface, which is tailored for urban design. So what is ArcGIS Urban? It's a web-based solution which offers planners and developers a collaborative, data-driven scenario planning environment. And Urban uses a digital twin of the area of interest and supports the use of contextual web scenes to help guide design. Originally licensed as an add-on, ArcGIS Urban is now available through the Professional Plus named user type license, and it has the three elements on the screen. So plans support strategic plans or design codes, so users can design massing scenarios which model metrics in real time. Then we have projects which support planning applications. Users can upload 3D BIM models or sketch their own building massing and compare proposals. And then we have stakeholder engagement as well. So your designs and your proposals can be shared in many ways using ArcGIS. And I'm going to run through each of these in turn. So following on from Dan's live demo, this is recorded just because ArcGIS Urban has about 20 to 30 seconds time to actually load. So I'm going to save that time today because I've got a lot to cover. So on load, after this nice splash screen, the user is presented with an overview of all the plans and projects within the area of interest. And the digital twin consists of a level of detail 2 3D object scene layer from our partner Blue Sky, and you can see a trees point scene layer as on there as well. So I can switch from schematic to realistic, which loads an integrated reality mesh which renders quickly. And this example is Blue Sky's Metro Vista product. So in this overview, you get a feel for the development in your area of interest, and you can see some of the development symbolized in an array of colors that represent the planning application status. So there's a red one there and a green one there just as I zoom out, and you can open a list of projects and filter by planning application status. So you can see the pre-apps are symbolized in red, the green is under construction, and that yellow one has been granted permission. You can also open a list of plans within the urban model. These are the site allocations with ongoing feasibility studies. So clicking on one of these would zoom into the site. But what I'm going to do, I'm just going to manually pan across to my site of interest, my plan here by the river. And to reiterate, all the data shown in this demo is fictional. So when I hover over the plan, the details are returned in this pop-up. And when I click, the plan editor opens and I can start work on the design. So if I select a parcel to the east and zoom in, I can demolish the parcel area ready for my new design using the demolish tool. So what you'll see here, just clicking on the demolish tool, I'll select the parcel and that portion of the mesh will be hidden. I can then upload a site plan from a developer or an architect to provide some context to me to help me create my building massing. So what I'll do now, just add that image in. I'm going to georeference the plan using the built-in tools, and I've sped this up a little bit for the webinar today. And what I'm just going to show are the resize and the reposition tools. And it's easier to do this in the schematic view, so let me just switch back to that. So Urban allows you to georeference images far more accurately than I'm showing you here. This is just the resize and the move. There are control point tools in here as well, which some of you might be familiar with from the desktop product, ArcGIS Pro. And you used to have to do this in Pro and publish the image to the web, but ArcGIS Urban is evolving to require minimal input from GIS professionals, GIS teams, so your planners and urban designers could do this themselves. So what I'm going to do now, switch to the development tab, and I'm just going to start drawing my design based off my georeferenced image. And I'll start by selecting my parcel and drawing my first building space. So I'm drawing the foundational floor, and please note the digitizing guides to help me draw perpendicular lines. And the built-in tools allow me to quickly duplicate the building space as well. So I'm going to make this building 4 stories in height. Whilst do that, it's just want to note the first vertex I drop on that foundational floor sets the elevation. And as I want the lowest floor to be underground parking, I'm just going to use one of the tools to reduce the elevation of the building. And as you can see now on the right-hand side of the plan editor interface, the building space inherits a default space use type, which is unspecified, and a floor height. And what I'm going to do now is amend that space use type or use class to market housing, and this is then reflected in the map and in the edit spaces panel on the right hand side, which is showing the use class and the area within the parcel. I can then amend the selected building space using the digitizing tool. So you'll see me here just change the shape of that top floor, and then again using those tools I can duplicate the floors to create a tower, and there's always one building space selected, and I can quickly just delete one of the building spaces like that. So ArcGIS Urban supports design comparison, and they're called scenarios. So currently scenario 1, if I switch to scenario 2, in true Blue Peter style, here's a design I made earlier. So this scenario gives you a better indication of the array of use classes or space use types and the areas of each within this parcel. So you can see hotel, green roof, parking, and market housing. And the urban model includes customizable metrics, which can be surfaced through this dashboard. Here you can see the total residential units in the design, total population, and a summary of the parking balance, which is inferred from the number of residential units. My design has 14 too few parking spaces, so I can go in and amend my design. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to select one of my building spaces, which is marked as market housing, and I'm going to amend it to be structured parking. And once I change this to structured parking by finding it in my list, the change is instantly reflected in my dashboard. So you'll now see that I have 26 too many parking spaces. So I can go in and just keep tweaking my designs. So as well as including the analysis tools that Dan previously outlined in Scene Viewer, Urban supports the creation of viewpoints. So these could be strategically important views from a local plan. So this is my bridge view, for example. And once I'm happy with my design, so happy with scenario 2 here, I can export the design to a web scene. So what I do, I give it a name and then decide on which metrics I want to visualize. So here I'm just bringing through the metrics I just showed you in the dashboard. And what I can do is I can amend the symbology for each of these metrics. And I can choose these visualizations at a building and also a parcel level. And you can see from number 2 to 3, it's bringing across the symbology I set previously. And once the export is complete, again, I've sped this up, I get the option to open my web scene in one of the app builders that Dan showed. So Instant Apps, Experience Builder, Story Maps, or 360 VR Experience. But I can also open it in Scene Viewer, as I'm doing now. And here you can see my design, my scenario 2. And in the layers list, I can now toggle on those metrics that were selected during that export. So just toggling through the different ones. Now on the right hand side, I can also click on the building spaces to return the attribution. So this is doing it at a building, like a floor level. So switching back to ArcGIS Urban, let's move away from our plan and let's take a look at the projects which can be used to reflect planning applications. So I prefer realistic view, so I'm just going to turn the realistic view back on with that mesh, and I'm going to click on the project in the overview to open my project editor, which looks a little bit different to the plan editor. And the panel now on the left-hand side is showing the project details, and I can see it's a pre-application. And I've already demolished the parcel ready for the next stage. And that stage is using the development tools to directly add a 3D building model or BIM file that I received from a developer. In this instance, it's a IFC file. And the model, which is stored as a building scene layer, appears within the project boundary, but its scale was all wrong there. So what I need to do is position and resize the model, and the editing tools allow me to do this. The developers provided me with some coordinates to pin the building to, which is great, and then I can scale that model by a third. So now that building looks a little bit more keeping with its surroundings, so the city folk won't come and chase me that I've built a huge tower block in the city. But what I can also do, on top of using a BIM model, I can actually sketch my own volumes or buildings, and I can add additional assets. So I'm going to add some trees that are part of this application. I don't need to add any cars or aeroplanes at this stage. But just like the plans, the projects also support scenarios, exporting web scenes, and analysis. So again, those analysis tools that Dan showed earlier in Scene Viewer, and you can see them there. Now, your analysis results can be saved in Urban to come back to at a later date. There's also a discussions part of Urban, so I'm just creating a group now so that I can discuss this project design with others in my team. So in this example, we want a colleague to check this design, this BIM model, against some planning constraints. So I'm just leaving a note to ask if this can be investigated. And if I switch to a user in this group that I've created, I can check and I can add a comment back around this design. So web scenes with context data can be added to ArcGIS Urban. And what I'm going to show you now is how I can bring up my list of my context scenes, and I'm going to switch on my conservation area context scene. This could be all the planning constraints in one. So as you can see now, the building design is too tall for that conservation area. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back to my discussions panel, and I'm going to let the team know that that building is too high. And the height of that conservation area in this example was just configured in the same way that Dan extruded the residential units in the Cambridge demo earlier. So if I just close that down and switch myself back to ArcGIS Urban and its overview, what you will see is that the outline of my 3D building model appears as a red object, symbolizing that it's a pre-application in the kind of overview of all the development in the area of interest. So the third element of Urban was the stakeholder engagement. So 3D is extremely powerful for stakeholder engagement, and our customers have realized a positive return on investment from embedding 3D into their workflows. And the example here on the top right is a publicly shared ArcGIS Experience Builder application that is helping attract inward investment into a city centre. The example in the bottom right, again, the massing created in Urban, exported to Scene Viewer. This has been pulled into story maps and again, publicly shared. And this story map communicates the different designs for a large development site. But that's not all on the stakeholder engagement side of things. So engagement can be taken a step further using immersive viewing technology, such as Esri's XR Viewer, which is currently in beta. So you can use web scenes, 3D scene layers, and other data shared in ArcGIS Online to create immersive virtual reality experiences. So your 3D outputs can be viewed from the desktop or using a headset. It might be you want to do a risk assessment though before you use a headset. And this technology is great. It helps teams get to alignment fast, it helps teams spot issues earlier, and allows the presentation of work in a way that non-technical audiences can relate to. And it looks like my video is now back to the usual Scottish weather. I can say that being in Edinburgh, I think. So, in summary, 3D GIS capabilities can be found across ArcGIS and are helping many of our customers realize a return on investment. We will share links to case studies after today's webinar. And yeah, today we covered the basics of getting started with 3D in ArcGIS and took you on a high-level tour of Indoors GIS and ArcGIS Urban. So thank you so much for listening, and back to Alicia.
Thank you, Dave. So before we go any further, just a quick reminder that if you are keen to sign up to another one of our webinars, the good news is that you will not have to wait long. So on the 18th of September, we will be back with another installment, this time taking a deep dive into AI assistance, which I think is going to be quite a popular webinar. So if you would like to attend, please ensure you register as soon as possible. Okay, so with that, we're now going to move on to the Q&A segment of today's webinar. And I can see you've all been quite busy going through and logging your questions on Slido. So let's take a look and see what we have. So up first, we have one of our most popular questions, which asks, what license level are all of these applications available in? It's a very good question. We've shown you everything from Scene Viewer to Experience Builder all the way through to Urban. Depending upon the solution you're using will depend upon the named user required. But the best resource to check that out is the matrix on our website. So we'll circulate a link in the follow-up email, but it's a really nice, neat matrix table where you can see which solution is required and what license level you'll need. So hopefully that helps you get started. Okay, next, I think there's another question perhaps for you, Dan, and the question asks, are these applications and functions available for use in GIS Enterprise, given the greater credit costs of hosting 3D data on ArcGIS Online?
Yeah, so important. I think almost all of what I showed today is available for users of Enterprise as well as ArcGIS Online. And it's also worth noting that there's no inherently greater cost for hosting 3D data in ArcGIS Online. What we showed you today was 2D data then extruded from a map. So there's no additional cost for hosting that 3D data. Obviously, if you're storing large image files like that blue sky image, that's going to incur a significant credit cost. But for the vast majority of what I showed today, there's no greater cost for storing that 3D data.
Thank you, Dan. Okay, next up, we have another question which I can take. So the question asks, how can we get access to the blue sky imagery layer used in the demo? Well, the best way is to get in touch with us. If you know who your account manager is, we can put you in touch with our content team and discuss ways in which we can grant you access. But if not, just get in touch with us on one of our aliases or respond back to the follow-up resources and we will connect you with the right people. Okay, another one for you, Dan. So there's one that asks, can you directly import DWG drawings into ArcGIS Pro?
Yes, so I guess the simple answer for that is yes. Yeah, DWG files are directly readable in ArcGIS Pro, and I guess we could send out some documentation on the back of this webinar with some links as to how to do that. But yeah, if you're working in Autodesk, there is also some additional options. There's some plugins for some third-party CAD providers that allow you to convert that data into a friendly format to use in GIS. But long answer short, yes, you can read DWGs in ArcGIS Pro.
Thank you, Dan. I think, Dave, we've got one for you here. So the question asks, how can we access the realistic meshes for different parts of the UK? What types of licenses are required and where can the meshes be found?
Thanks, Lucia. Yeah, so the meshes that I showed today are from our partner Blue Sky. There are other providers available, and there is a mesh product on its way from Google that I'm yet to test. So that's something to keep an eye out for, because I've seen it and it does cover different parts of the UK, but at present all the projects that I've worked on personally have been using Blue Sky's mesh products, so hopefully that helps the person who raised that question.
Thank you, Dave. Dan, I've got another one for you. So the question asks, can we use D2EG/CAD plans in indoor modelling? We have built these from AutoCAD in the past.
Yes, you can. So, in order for that CAD/DWG plan to kind of work as part of your indoor modeling, there needs to be a kind of a floor value assigned to that CAD plan. So, some conversion will be required to get it to interact with that indoor model. But yes, if you have detailed drawings, say showing tables, stairs, windows, doors, those can be integrated as part of that indoor model as well.
Perfect, thank you, Dan. Then there's one here that I can take. So the question asks, is the 360 VR viewer available in Portal? If so, which version? Unfortunately not at the moment. It is only supported in ArcGIS Online. Okay, and Dan, I think we've got another one for you. So the question asks, indoor modelling looks good for planning and room management, but do you have any case studies for emergency services, e.g. evacuation of tall buildings?
Sure. So it's important to note that through the ArcGIS Indoors organization license type, or Indoors Maps and Spaces license type, you get access to wayfinding, and that can be used for routing throughout your indoor model. I don't know of any use cases we have to hand, but I believe if you get in touch with your customer success manager, sales, we can get in touch with you and look to organize a demo. But yes, and I guess in short, again, it can be used for wayfinding and routing.
Thank you, Dan. And I think we have time perhaps for one more question, which, Dan, I'm going to come back to you. So can you upload or customize the image vector files for the symbology, or is it this strictly locked down to what is provided?
Yeah, so I believe in 2018 the ability to publish custom 3D symbols became available. So you can publish these from ArcGIS Pro, you can create a style file, you can source a 3D image either from online or manufacture one yourself and publish that as a style from Pro and then consume that organization wide as a custom symbol. So yes, you can upload custom symbols, not just those that are available to you out of the box in the scene viewer.
Perfect. Thank you, Dan, and thank you, Dave. So, as we start to draw today's webinar to a close, this is just a gentle reminder that if you haven't already filled in the poll section of Slido, please ensure you take the time to. Feedback is really important to us so we can improve our webinars as we go forward. So, if you do get a chance before or after lunch, please ensure you do so. So all that's left for me to say is a huge thank you to our presenters today, Dan and Dave. Some incredible insight there. Hopefully, if you're at the beginning of your journey when it comes to 3D and indoors, or in the middle, or very well versed, hopefully there's something in there that you can take away and learn a little bit more on. Also, a big thank you for everybody who's tuned in today. I hope you found it insightful. So all that's left for me to say from the team at Esri UK is thank you. I hope you all have a lovely long bank holiday weekend when you get to it, and we can't wait to see you next month. Bye for now.